This is episode 2 of the Ian McGarry Coaching Podcast. I hope you all enjoyed the first episode. And today we have a different guest completely. We have Ryan Smyth with us, who's a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. He's the owner of Atlantic BJJ Jiu-Jitsu in Sligo, and a European gold medalist in Jiu-Jitsu as well. So Ryan has an extensive background in martial arts, and he can definitely bring a lot to the table in terms of lessons from his jiu-jitsu background, his business background, and just his mindset as well. So Ryan, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, so I suppose, Ryan, why I wanted to have you on was Ryan is my jiu-jitsu coach as well, so I'll point it out. But I'm only a white belt. But I look up to you a lot, Ryan, and in terms of from the jiu-jitsu side of things, from mindset as well, and also from a business standpoint. So I thought you'd be a very, very good guest to have on. And obviously with the explosion of the UFC in the last few years and Conor McGregor and all this kind of stuff, there's been more of a light kind of shine towards jiu-jitsu. It's become a little bit more popularized. And I think now more than ever, I think people are starting to understand what it is. There's still a lot of misconceptions, I think, but people are starting to grasp what it is and to grasp the massive amount of benefits that there are physically and mentally as well from it. And I just wanted to get your take on it. So, like, kind of, what's your background with jiu-jitsu? How did you get started?
Well, I got started in 2004, and Mickey Downs and Francie Mahon are local karate black belts. At the time, they ran the Higashi Karate Club. Yeah. They ran a self-defense course for I can't remember now, maybe 6-8 weeks. And myself and Morgan, my brother, who's also a black belt, we attended the course, and it was a lot of grappling-based self-defense. So it was a little bit different than the standard of the time. It was mostly in Sligo. There was kickboxing or karate or striking martial arts. Yeah. So it was very different. And straight away we could see, there's something to this. I like this, and just kind of got hooked in from there. And progressively then we joined in with the club. And the guys we were doing, it was more like MMA back then. Yeah. We were doing striking, we were doing grappling, wrestling, all sorts. But that was a very early days, so the level was still at the early stages of development. So 2005 and 6, it would have been more MMA based and later into jiu-jitsu. But even back 2005 and 6, MMA was quite popular in Ireland at that time. There was a lot of tournaments and amateur league and things like that. And the scene wasn't too bad. If anything, it's not much different today with MMA. Yeah. But the growth of jiu-jitsu has been massive. But I know the growth of MMA has been huge. But that, I would say, to the general public. Yeah. But the people who do martial arts, I think the same kind of people still doing it today. But a lot of people that did MMA in the early days, they kind of diverged into jiu-jitsu, because it was a little bit easier on the body and less severe, less intense, but you could still get great training out of it, and you could still train as you got older as well, where MMA is such a hard sport. You need to be well-rounded in the striking, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, and you need to be in savage shape as well. So the commitment level to be good at MMA is huge. And the skill set that you need, it's so easy to dilute, if you start training in all the different styles at once and you don't master one, you become a jack of all trades and you can only get so far. So that's when we were talking about it at the time, myself, Morgan and Mickey Downs, and we were thinking about it a lot, and we said, look, let's just go into jiu-jitsu, and because at that time there was no very high level of jiu-jitsu in Sligo at that time, and it was just starting to grow around the country. So we just put everything into jiu-jitsu at that time. In around probably 2008 or 9, we started to go full training, just jiu-jitsu, just for self-defense and for sport jiu-jitsu. And And ever since that, we just started to build it up and grow the club since that point.
And I suppose the growth of the club as well, like the club is pretty well known in Sligo as a whole. Like I think everyone here, so we're in the northwest of Ireland, and everyone here kind of locally kind of does know a little bit about the club or has some affiliation or knew someone who went at some stage. But I suppose, did like, how did you find like initially, was there a big kind of surge or kind of uptake for people that were kind of interested, or was it kind of a gradual growth?
I would say quite gradual growth. If I was I'm doing some work at my house there, and I was cleaning out, seeing some old records from maybe 2012. 8 years ago, we would have had maybe 10 monthly members,
Yeah.
And a few then we would have done like a pay per class thing, and we probably had another 10 or 15. So there's probably about 25 people in the club 8 years ago, and now there's 150, including like children. Yeah. So, and we have kids class, we have intermediate, beginner, advanced. So we have several different levels too. Where in the old days, you just kind of come in, we show you a mount escape and an arm bar, and then we just went at it, go to war, Not many people would stay, strangely enough. Only the crazy ones. So that was the era of the survivors, If you got through that time, you did well, because it was so tough.
Yeah.
Because the problem was we didn't really know in the early days how you should train jiu-jitsu properly, mm-hmm. and how you should develop it. So later on, we sought out like experts to guide us in the right way. And in 2011, it's just coming up on our 10-year anniversary shortly. We joined the Alliance Jiu-Jitsu Association, which is an international organization and one of the best teams in the world as far as competitors. And they also have a great system of instruction and teaching. So we joined up with those guys, Ramiro Jacare, Fabio Gurgel, and we started to learn the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu correctly. Where we had been kind of teaching ourselves and going to seminars and doing bits and pieces, but it was a long, drawn-out process of trial and error. And we wanted to, and that's a good bit of advice for anyone as well, is that like you can actually do something yourself, like you can learn it yourself, but it's going to take a long time. If you seek out someone who knows more than you, you're going to speed up the process in a huge way. Like, so we were clever enough, like that we were able to figure out things, but it could take you 5 years to figure out one thing where someone else has it already done and they could just tell you in 5 minutes. Yeah. And I suppose a lot of the students we have today don't appreciate some of the things that we can say in 5 minutes or in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing, that the level has gone up. So we got those guys to help us out with our curriculum and our program. And back in 2011, we brought over Bruno Malfacini, who's 10-time world champion now in jiu-jitsu. He was one of the first coaches we brought over to help us out. And he didn't really show us like a lot of competitive skills and stuff like that. He just made sure that the foundational skills that we had were on point, and he was a great teacher as well. And that helped us grow a lot. Then myself and Morgan, we went to Atlanta. The club kind of got together and sent us over. So we went to Atlanta, the US, to Ramiro Jacare's gym. And at that time, it was probably the top gym in the US. They had several world champions and Pan American champions at all belt levels. And it was a very, very, very intense gym. There was a lot of competitors there and great competitive atmosphere. So we went over and we did an instructor course, and we started to learn properly how to teach. We were there for about 2 weeks and training with also Lucas Lepri, was another guy that was there, another well-known world champion in the jiu-jitsu world, and learned a huge amount at that time. That was 2011. We came back, and we started to change our program, and we started to implement what we had learned, and you could see the difference straight away. And gradually, we had our beginners program now, and then the numbers started to climb up. And people were staying now because they weren't being fed to the wolves kind of thing, thrown in the deep end. So people were able to learn. And this is something I'm studying a lot at the moment, is how people learn and how to be a better coach, so that you can get your message across and people will understand it and take the knowledge in. And so each year since then, we brought over another one of the coaches from the Alliance Jiu-Jitsu Association to help grow and build our knowledge as coaches on a technical level and a coaching level. And just ever since we had done that, it made a massive, massive growth. You could see it every year, as we were growing as coaches, the students were growing as well and getting better all the time. And the standards were going up and up. And that was as we kind of committed to that in about 2010, 11, that we were going to seek out the best people to help us train, and that we could pass it on down the line then. And now today, you can see a huge difference now. We have a very good program from beginner, intermediate, advanced, and also from the kids. We take the kids at 7 years old, and that's running for about 5 years now. And it's one of the things I'm kind of excited to see in the future, is how that program starts to pan out, because we implemented a kind of a long-term athlete development kind of model where we have certain things we teach the kids, but our focus more on them is a lot different than what would be with the adults.
Yeah.
And we have taken different parts of that for the adults as well, because sometimes an adult comes to us, he's trained for 10 years in another sport, so he's kind of fit. But also we get a lot of adults that would come who haven't done anything ever. Yeah. And so they're two very different people, and you'd start them in the beginners. And it takes each one a different kind of a time to accustomize themselves to the sport,
Jiu-Jitsu is, I kind of noticed that, like I started a year ago, and it's like I would have a background in like rugby, in sprinting, and in like bodybuilding. So kind of power-based things, but I suppose very single plane operations. And I suppose the thing I've noticed with Jiu-Jitsu is that the way you move is not like anything else I've ever seen. It's like how you actually figure out that your body can actually move in ways that you don't even think are it's like matrix stuff almost. When you see the way some people move, and it's, I suppose, it's like you're learning to walk again. And I think one of the best analogies I ever kind of heard for jiu-jitsu was, it's like speaking a language. And I suppose at a beginner level, you're doing the ABCs, and say purple belt is able to, read out paragraphs nice and slowly, but can read paragraphs and sentences. And a black belt can recite Shakespeare almost. That's the difference. Because there's so much to it. But I suppose, like anything, when you break it down, and you've developed such a good system there at the club, that when things are broken down into a very logistical structure and things have a good follow through, it's like for my own coaching, when I'm coaching clients, and allowing them a certain amount of room in each phase, but not letting them get ahead of themselves. And you probably, I'd say one of your biggest frustrations is YouTube is great, but I think people probably who are kind of looking at stuff they shouldn't be looking at, it's great that they're looking at stuff, but they're actually thinking that, oh yeah, I'll do that, and they're kind of jumping into it, and they're forgetting the concepts, the core fundamentals that are like essential. I'd say, like, you probably come across that quite a bit. I'd say just people kind of getting ahead of themselves nearly.
Yeah, sometimes. Some people do have some fascination with jumping ahead. They want to go and jump straight to the end. They want to learn the hardest, most difficult things. Yeah. And if we're not doing it in the class, they'll seek it out on YouTube or something like that. Yeah. But generally, most people that do that, they might end up just wasting a bit of time for themselves, and they come back around again anyway. So I don't get too frustrated about it. I know that it's just a natural way, because you sometimes just can't tell someone, you can
Maybe curiosity,
show them.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good to have that as well, because I think in the long run they'll have that enthusiasm and they'll have that just real interest in the sport, which is fine. I do love to see that. The only thing I'd be concerned is, someone does or sees something like some crazy submission or something, and then they try it out on some other unsuspecting person, and they shouldn't be doing it, and they might injure them, or that'd be the main concern I'd have. But I think in the early days, people should expose themselves to as much as possible. So watch the YouTube, watch the match, especially matches, I think is really important, because you see a little bit more in a match than you do with someone demonstrating, because you see it live in action and being done. And that's one of the ways I learn a lot of stuff, is by watching guys that have a specific game that I want to learn from. And I kind of watch them, how they move and where their grip is. All right, he's kind of holding about 2 inches a bit higher than I usually do. Maybe that's something. And then I try that out in training and see if it works, But I think it's just good for the beginner to expose themselves to as much of the sport as possible. I'd say one problem on the other side is that some people come to train, we do the lesson, and they never think about jiu-jitsu again until the next class. So they're not really as engaged as maybe the guy that's looking at random stuff on YouTube. But I think the ones that seem to learn faster are the ones that just focus on the fundamentals. And when you have that foundation, if you feel like, if I get my guard passed or I'm in a bad position, I know what to do. At least I have an idea of 1 or 2 things to do, at least. And you'll focus on those rather than just kind of like trying to bump the guy over or use a bit of brute force, or and then you'll have a better learning experience in a trial and error. So you'll try to escape one way, right? That's not working. I must be missing something here. I'll have to look back at that later. But after training, then just reflecting a wee bit back, a lot of people get what they call the jiu-jitsu insomnia, is where something happened in training that day. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, it just comes to you like, oh yeah, I should have put my hand over there.
I think actually one of the funny things you're saying about how the mind learns, and it's really fascinating how a human mind can be molded and kind of malleable, especially for the kids who are doing it. Definitely for the kids, but even for adults. One thing that, from my experience, and again, I'm only at a short time, but I'm coming from the outside looking in, is that I would leave training and we'd do like 1 hour training, and I'd leave training and my mind would be literally like, it's like in my head, I'm just like, it's like I'm just literally in my head over and over again for about 3 hours after that. So till the time I go to bed, I'm thinking about like, oh, you do this, and step by step by step, and I'm replaying it in my mind over and over and over and over and over again. And I actually love that. I love being in that process of you're so kind of enthusiastic about it that like it's all you can think. You're just kind of in your head. You're just tinkering in your head. And you're just you're putting it all together in your head. And then the next time you go and you kind of cover that kind of same scenario again, but literally just very methodically over the course of time, it starts all clicking perfectly. And it's very satisfying to, like, I suppose when like yourself is teaching someone something, like, so if you teach me something and okay, I go, great, and that's technique, but actually then applying it sometimes in the same session, in a sparring situation, applying what you just learned 30 minutes ago and getting it right, and that the feeling of satisfaction of like, oh yeah, this is where I would use this. And I suppose when you do that, it clicks even more, because then you can actually you can put that piece into a place, so you can actually rationalize, just like learning the English language. If I was doing my vocabulary, I thought that should go here, rather than I'm knowing where to put my words now, rather than just, oh, that's great, I'll just bank that, and I won't know when to use it. I won't know what situation will be more appropriate. And that's one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu as well, is that it's so intellectual. It's not just physical. your mind is going as much as your body, and the fact that it's for anyone who hasn't done jiu-jitsu before, it's as much mental as it is physical in a lot of ways, because you're thinking 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead, and the higher level you are, you can think even more steps ahead again, and it's kind of selecting then what tool you need for what job you have, and the possibilities and the variations are huge, and that's why it's really interesting when you do get into it, because you kind of see like the scope of this is massive, and I personally enjoy like having something that's not easy. I usually pick things that are hard, because I like to actually have, something that I can develop over time, rather than have like quick satisfaction of like, oh, I'm great at this, and it's easy. And I suppose for some people that might be a bit daunting. They might be a bit afraid to get stuck into something that like requires that much effort and continual effort over time. But I think for anyone who wants to actually challenge themselves and wants to actually kind of see mentally and physically where they're able to go and how much they can push themselves, jiu-jitsu is the best thing I've ever come across for all those things. And like, what kind of practical, in terms of, rather than just self-defense, because obviously for your course as well, Ryan, you do cover kind of self-defense training, as well as competition style training as well. So like, I suppose we could go into the fact that there's self-defense jiu-jitsu and there's sport jiu-jitsu as well, and just so people know that there's different types of jiu-jitsu as well, not just it's not just all one or the other. There is both. But what practical takeaways do you think? What lessons can people learn from jiu-jitsu outside of the gym?
Well, say if we start with the self-defense, like jiu-jitsu is essentially a self-defense martial art, and then for people to stay within the sport for longer, it's harder to train. It's hard to train self-defense, because like, you can't just go and punch someone in the face, and like proper street stuff, like grab someone and break their finger, or these kind of things. So you can train as realistically as possible without having that risk of brute force injury or traumatic injury. You can't poke somebody in the eyes or bite them or something, but these are things that can happen on the street situation. Yeah. So like jiu-jitsu is training for the self-defense in as practical a way as possible and as realistically as possible, so that if you do get into a situation, you'll feel more confident to deal with it and be able to stay calm under pressure. And that kind of thing, I think, is probably one of the biggest things that you could take away. And that's just saying in a self-defense situation, if you did get into something, that you're able to just not get that tunnel vision where the alternative like is the freeze. Some people would freeze up and they just wouldn't know what to do, so they wouldn't do anything. They'd nearly just curl up in a ball and just wait till the person gets tired from beating them or something. Or they're just not sure what to do, so they freeze. It's a very common reaction in a situation. Or the other reaction from an untrained person is instinctively just to start swinging punches and go ballistic. Yeah. And you could do that for maybe 30 seconds, if maybe a minute if you're fit. Yeah. And if the guy's bigger than you, it's probably not going to work out well for you. So that's where jiu-jitsu comes in, and it shows you, like, number one, that you can be calm and you can control the situation. So that's a technical thing, but the confidence that gives you, knowing that if something happens, that you're able to handle yourself, or at least minimize the damage, or at least avoid serious injury, like having that alone. And then just in the general world, like, people today, like, throughout history, always have trouble with, like, intimidation, like just in ordinary day-to-day activities. Like if you're at work or something like that, and there's some guy who's kind of got an attitude and he's coming over trying to intimidate you, and just, it's not like anything would ever happen to you. Like, it's not like he's going to hit you at work or try and choke you at work. No, it doesn't happen. But it's just that underlying kind of feeling that people get of intimidation, and they feel a bit of anxiety. And having the knowledge that you can defend yourself in a situation it just gives that little bit of confidence, and then you don't feel that anymore. And the guy that's kind of intimidating you is doing it, and he's like, my usual trick is not working on this guy. What's going on? And then he starts, it actually turns the tables without you doing anything. It's just your confidence shows through your body language and through the way you handle yourself. And knowing that you can have that ability to defend yourself, I think, is a massive thing. And outside of that, then I think you do build a lot of patience. You know, if you're going to do it, you're going to be patient, knowing that that if you want to learn something worthwhile, it is going to take time. And jiu-jitsu is one of those things that does take time for all the pieces to start to come together and for you to start seeing some progress. And if you can transfer that into your everyday life, I think it's huge. If you do have some problems in life, like you know that there is a way that you can find out how to fix it. Like there is a way. Like sometimes it's not going to be the most ideal thing because people have all sorts of different personal situations, and there's not always like a magic bullet solution. But just to be calm and to know that, right, I can figure a way that we can get through this situation. There's always something that we can do rather than do nothing. Same as we were talking about there with freezing up. Some people have a bad situation in life and they tend not to address it, hoping that it's going to go. The attitude of jiu-jitsu, you're ready to face problems rather than kind of hide from them.
Yeah.
And those are big lessons from it. A lot of problem solving, decision making, and the idea that you're working your body and mind at the same time, that you're doing some physical activity, that you go in, you're getting the sweat done, but you're also making connections in your brain for lots of different ideas and lots of thoughts. Like you were saying about how you'd be thinking about it after training for a while, like visualization. It's a huge thing that I guess some people do it just automatically, just kind of, but some people don't do it. But you can make massive ground in jiu-jitsu from visualization and from other sports and other activities. So you just imagining yourself in the situation, and then what would I do? And you're kind of placing yourself in that scenario. So when you do get into it, even though you've never been in it, you are a little bit more familiar and more comfortable.
Yeah.
And sports people have been using that for a long time for competitions.
The sprinters, that was the whole thing that Olympic sprinters used to replay, like as in before the event, literally 20-30 seconds before their sprint, in their mind, I suppose, frame it exactly as it's going to happen. And they're so sure of exactly their victory, and they see themselves winning. And it's even actually shown as well in research of doing this, is that muscles actually fire and neural connections improve when someone actually, before they're doing whatever it is they have to do, it actually improves, so that their performance actually improves from their mind actually, I suppose, doing a dry run, a test run mentally, the body actually reacts better, because I suppose you're just doing like a trial run in your mind, and your body will just follow. And I suppose just setting up the instructions in your mind for your body. But I suppose one of the big kind of takeaways as well from jiu-jitsu is that for a lot of people out there, they're never, and this is a good thing, I'm going to say it's a good thing, a lot of people out there in modern society, we've been very sterilized in terms of, you go to work, you work in an office, you have a boss who you don't like, and you have inter-office issues, and you go home and you watch telly and you go to bed. And now that's just, obviously that's one scenario, but I'm just saying is that a lot of people have very kind of sterilized lives, and that there isn't that kind of primal kind of requirement for like physical survival, or for I suppose problem solving under danger, under duress. And I kind of think that it's necessary for people to have like a little bit of struggle. Everyone should have a little bit of struggle in your life. I just think that if you have an easy life and you breeze through life, it's not going to be very enjoyable. I think actually you do need a little bit of physical and mental struggle in your life. And like you said there, it's finding what you can work with. And that's even just, I'm not going to harp on it, but like even with COVID and everything, I'm telling people all the time, there's still things you can improve. So like there's still things you can work on, and just focus on that. Focus on what you can do. And I suppose with just with jiu-jitsu is that you're getting an environment that is first of all, it's a safe environment. So if anyone thinks that, Jesus, I don't go in and get my neck broken or whatever, it's very safe. It's one of, like, for a full contact sport and martial art, it is incredibly safe. And obviously as well, like, you can tap at any time. So the other person will respect that and stop straight away. So the second you feel there's too much pressure on, that's giving you a safety net. But it's also the fact that I don't think anyone is ever going to have their, be in a headlock or being like, in like a really tight situation where they're being put under pressure by someone else. It's very rare that someone actually has that in their life. And it's actually no harm having that time to time, because it takes away your ego, first of all, and it dissolves your ego. And I think the ego is what holds a lot of people back in general, in terms of just getting along in life. They hold themselves back because their ego is very strong. And one of the biggest things with jiu-jitsu is that if you have an ego, you better back it up because you're going to be found out straight away. And I think you'll obviously have guys like I be much bigger than the average jiu-jitsu person who competes or who trains in terms of like height for weight. But like, I have no ego. I can say this hand in heart. I have no ego about me in terms of going in there, because you would wrap me up into a pretzel. Like, literally, like I wouldn't. There's a 25-30 kilo weight difference between me and you, and I'd say if someone put €1 million on the table, €1 million, I couldn't submit you. And I'm not even like, that's like, if literally someone put €1 million on a table, and that's how, just so people are kind of, people might not know the levels of how far it goes up, but I couldn't beat you for €1 million. €1 million, I couldn't beat you. I couldn't do anything to you. I could do nothing to you. I'm like a child, and it's actually good. It's a good thing to actually have that, like, to have that realization that, like, no, you're like, you got to work now for a couple of, like, as in, to even have a look in, even a little like look in, you're gonna have to work for years and years to develop it. But it's that the fact that there is no ego involved, and it's a pure pursuit, is very good for, like, just for development as a human as well. Like, it's people need that. And you can have someone who's a CEO, or they're in a high power job, and they are, they're the boss, and that they're the alpha male in their world. You take them out of that world and you put it into like a jiu-jitsu environment, they're not that anymore. And I suppose it's making them feel like, I'm a human. I'm not a whatever I'm told I am. I'm not like this thing. I'm a person, like, and people have room to grow and room to improve, and they have areas where they can, and they can adapt. And I suppose it makes the experience very real for people. It's a very challenging and real area to get into. And that's why, again, like, that's why it's amazing. It'll teach you, like, I've learned a lot personally in my personal life, and it's taught me a lot of lessons outside of just the actual physical jiu-jitsu. Like, and one of the biggest things I would say as well is that even though it's an individual sport, the team around you and the community aspect of it is absolutely amazing. And that's credit to you as well, Ryan, because you've put together like a fantastic club. Like, it's one of the best clubs in the country, and the group of people, and they're probably listening now to this, but the group of people involved in the club have been the most welcoming, just kind people that I've ever met. Like, and I'm coming into this, like, I'm not from Sligo originally. Like, I'm here a few years, but I would keep to myself an awful lot. But I've made more friends in the club than I've made in my 5 years living in Sligo. So that just goes to show you, and they do anything for you as well. So I think, it's the people as well, and that's credit to you as well. You've put together a strong group as well.
That's great to hear that, Ian. It's great to know that. And it's one thing I love about the club is that there's such great group of people there, and very supportive. And everyone is on the same track, you know, and even the more experienced guys, they've been a white belt at one time, and they know what it's like being a new student in a sport, and especially the guys that are there longer know how tough it was back in their days when they started out. And myself too, like I look back to the early days, and one of the things I noticed in the early days in other martial arts, there was a kind of a group, you know, that you'd have the black belts would be over one side, and then the white belts would be over the other side, and they'd be kind of looking over kind of sheepishly, and it wasn't too much, you know, there wouldn't be much interaction, you know, you'd have to be there for about 2 years before. It's like the Brad Pitt movie, Fury.
Yes.
The young guy joined the tank squadron. The boys wouldn't talk to him because they were afraid he was going to die.
Yeah.
in the war. But sometimes that happens with groups, you know, because there'll be a lot of people coming in and out. And so, you know, you'd make friends with someone and then they're gone, like, you know, after 2 weeks or a month, and then they're gone, you know. So people sometimes can be a little bit like less easy to make friends with people, but we do make a big effort to no matter what, like just go down and chat with people when someone comes in, make sure that they feel comfortable, and because the environment that you train in is it's probably the most important thing to develop the club. Because if people are coming in and it's kind of an ego atmosphere, you know, like guys are over the other mat, flex and ready for the spar and eyeballing, you know, you're just going to lie. You're like, this is not for me, you know, I don't like this. But if people are welcoming and the kind of asking you how you are and being friendly, and then you go training together and you get tapped out a few times, and then to shake your hand afterwards and say thanks very much.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of atmosphere you want. And no real like, oh, this guy's a white belt, I don't talk to him, you know. Maybe when he gets the purple belt I'll chat him, you know. But environment is a massive factor, and like you can look around to all major sports teams, and that the most successful ones have a great culture within their clubs. You could look at big teams like Manchester United or something. Like they'd have players coming in all the time, but they make a big effort to bring them into the culture of the club so that they become part of a team rather than just individual players.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helps grow over the long term as well.
And just obviously from the competition side of things, like the club does very well nationally, and obviously as well with the likes of yourself and other members of the club as well, internationally as well, as some like really high performers as well. But what would you say in terms of the club's success as a whole in competing? What is what's the biggest factor, do you think, in the club being so successful in terms of competition?
Well, I suppose two parts. One would be like the foundations. You know, like we don't focus as much on, you know, specific competition strategies too much.
Yeah.
But we just build a strong foundation within each person so that when they do go to the competition, it can be very chaotic, you know, like you're going against a guy you never met before. You don't know what he's going to do. He's from a different club. He might have a totally different game than what we play in our own club. But if your foundations are solid, it doesn't really matter what he does, because you know you can defend whatever is going to be thrown at you. And everyone that's come through the program, they got to like blue belt or above, they have studied the foundations, the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. They have good escapes, they have good defense, they have their attacks, they have their submissions, their sweeps, and their escapes from the bad positions. So they're fairly well-rounded at that stage. And then would be a little bit of like just the general atmosphere of the club, like how our mentality is, that we know going into competition that we train with some of the best guys around every day. So that gives you confidence as well. So you're knowing that your teammates are of a very high standard as well. So you're going to the competition and think, well, it can't be much worse than what we do at training anyway. And that gives you a lot of confidence. And then I guess like specifically then we might do certain tactical or strategic approaches that we would have that'd be different than some other team. But just pretty much get your fundamentals strong, commitment to training as well. Usually the guys that do well in competition have a good commitment in consistency of training, like, so that there's no point trying to get in shape a couple of weeks before the competition. You should be in shape 2 months out, and then you're just sharpening up your game. Where sometimes guys are like a couple of weeks out trying to cut weight and trying to, I want to get down to the next weight class, I'd be better there. And especially the newer guys, I'd be saying, like, don't even think about weight cut. When you're like a purple or brown belt, not unless you were like fairly overweight. And then
it was the end to lose.
Then like competition shouldn't be your priority. You should be like, just
lose weight.
You're just trying to lose a bit of weight and get in better shape, and then go to the competition. Because if you're 5'7" and you're 100 kgs, and you're going to go to the heavyweight category, the guy is going to be nearly 2 foot taller than you. It's going to be a hard day at the office. So it's to focus on the fundamentals, and then conditioning and fitness for the sport is important as well. Where there is a kind of a myth about jiu-jitsu that it's just pure technique, like if you just have the finest technique, but and that is true to a certain point. But you need to have the fitness to be able to just steadily maintain a pace. Like a marathon runner is not going to do well in a sprint. No, he has a great fitness, but he's not going. And the sprinter is not going to do well in a marathon. So you have to find the level of fitness specific to the sport by just making sure you're consistent in your training. And then if you want, be more specific with training outside in some kind of strength and conditioning program.
And just in terms of strength and conditioning towards martial arts and towards jiu-jitsu, like you've a fairly extensive background as well in strength and conditioning as well. You're very well versed on that side of things too. And I know you put a lot of focus on that side of things as well. But what would you say are the most important points to cover in terms of strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu?
Well, I think it's important to do some form of it. Like some people wouldn't do any, and there is a mentality in jiu-jitsu that just train jiu-jitsu to get better at jiu-jitsu. Which has a valid point. Like if you want to get better at a sport, play the sport, but it doesn't always work out like that. Because I take a swimmer, for example, that is just doing the front crawl. They're going to overdevelop the muscles on one side of the shoulder because they're always doing that pull. And they might actually do well for maybe 2-3 years, but then in the 4th, 5th year, they start getting some kind of injuries and this and that because the muscles on one side are pulling the shoulder forward out of the socket and then starts rubbing the bit of impingement. And so they never did their strength and conditioning. They should have been doing something to counterbalance that on the other side. And some people might think, I need to do more pull to get stronger on the pull. But in fact, you need to do the other side because that muscle is not being worked at all and you're getting weaker there and your other muscles are becoming dominant. So there is kind of like, I suppose, corrective exercises specific to your sport. And jiu-jitsu has a bit of that too. But I think if you're doing a general full body program in jiu-jitsu for every joint in the body, and an important factor in that too is not to be too intense. Heavy lifting can be detrimental because the tightness that develops in the muscles when you go to spar sometimes, and I've seen it a lot of times, the guys lifting heavy, sometimes the hamstring is just like seized up after doing a load of deadlifts, and then you go to train the next day and your knee pops because it got pushed the wrong direction and your leg was so tight after doing the deadlifts. The leg is super strong, but the joint was not strong.
I've actually noticed personally that like I still do 5 days a week of weights, and if you don't tailor, if you want to do that much weight training, if you don't tailor it around jiu-jitsu training, and you don't have a lot of mobility work and a lot of myofascial release work in there, if you don't do your homework, you will like literally everything kind of like you said there, muscles actually lock up in the middle of rolling with someone, and you're sparring someone, and like your hamstrings start to go, pop, and your triceps start to lock, and your arm is stuck there, and it's sort of choking you. It's not ideal, like, and it's obviously it could lead to worse things, that, like, you know, to knee issues or shoulder issues. And I suppose there's obviously there's a balance to be struck there, obviously, to some degree. With like I would never train legs and do jiu-jitsu the same day, ever. Yeah. I would actually 2 days before I did anything, I'd leave myself 48 hours before I even did anything, because I know it's I'll also be so slow. I'll be ridiculously slow as well, and it's counterproductive. So I suppose just if anyone is from my side of the street and looking in and saying, "Oh, what's the story with jiu-jitsu?" just bear that in mind. You do need to do your homework in terms of recovery and placement of your sessions. Very important.
Yeah, and like I think that's a lesson that I didn't learn until jiu-jitsu. Like, well, or I wouldn't have learned only for jiu-jitsu, is that like I would have done weight training with heavy weights, like for deadlifts and squats and bench press and overhead press, like the four main lifts, and I don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. But when I used to do that, what would happen, like you said, you know, like 48 hours afterwards, you'd be in bits, but not just the muscles, but the central nervous system.
Yeah.
So when you go to make decisions in the grappling, in the roll, your brain doesn't operate to the same efficiency as normal, because the central nervous system has been so taxed from the heavy lifting that you're half second slower. And that's when a lot of injuries occur, when someone goes to post their hand out, or they try to block something, but it didn't happen the way they thought it was going to happen, because the brain is slowed down.
Yeah.
So that has to be, to train hard afterwards, you do need a lot of recovery if you're lifting heavy. And when you go towards, like, a big problem, I guess, is beginners lifting too heavy too early as well, where a beginner should be for a couple, maybe 2 years even, if he has no background, not going really above 60%.
Yeah, I agree.
More higher reps.
Yeah.
And then later, as they build the technique and build the skills of doing proper lifting, then they can start to build up, but then not going above 80%.
Yeah. I agree with you. I see it all the time as well, like from my job and my background as well, is that I said this to Tristan in the last episode, and it's true. You actually have to earn, like, there's a lot of things you've got to earn the right to do. And just because you can lift a certain amount of weight doesn't mean you earn the right to do it. And it's like anything. It's like, just because you can physically do it doesn't mean you should. If someone is physically able to squat literally right down to the point their backside touches their ankles, and they can put a weight in their back and do it at the same time, that doesn't mean they should do it. Because if that person, for example, spent an awful lot of time training in a certain range, so they train in the upper range of that movement, and then they get fairly confident and say, "Oh, sure, I can do X amount of weight," like, you know, and they're doing essentially genuflections, they're not even squatting that deep. And then one day they take it on themselves, "Yeah, I'll go the whole way down with it," and it ends up in it doesn't end up good. So you know, I suppose they're opening themselves up to injury. But the other thing too is that a lot of people have to realize, and this is true for what you do and for what I do, is that you can't go 100 all the time. You cannot go 100. And it's the same for, I suppose, if you're training in jiu-jitsu and you're rolling with someone, you're not going to go 100%. You're not going to go, like, you know, you're in training, you know, and there's it's a balancing act. You got to learn, and sometimes you have to learn as you go. You might not, you know, and I think that's a really important point to get across to people, is that you don't have to always go 100% to get 100%. You know, so sometimes the smarter approach is to taper things, and actually, and there obviously, like you said, there your CNS recovery and your muscular recovery improves, so you can actually over time get more volume done, and the more volume you get done, the better you get, whether it's skill acquisition or it's strength gain. You would actually, this is a big thing as well, is if you train weights to failure all the time, you're not going to get much stronger. You're actually not going to get that much stronger. And that's like, I suppose, when people are looking at what percentage of my max should I train, usually, if you train 70 to 80 max, like that range will get you consistent gain and strength, rather than just go 100% and then they're failing, and failing and then something snaps because they weren't recovering properly. But that's an important point, is that you have to earn the right for everything. You can't just do it just because you physically can. Doesn't mean you should.
I'd agree. Even say if you were to take a squat as an example, someone should be like very good at doing a bodyweight squat, and then kind of progress on through the dumbbell, the goblet squat. Eventually, if they're doing well on those things, maybe then you can start thinking about putting a bar on your back and see how that goes. But it like from the jiu-jitsu point of view, like if you can do quite well with the dumbbells, it's going to be plenty. And then start to go on to one leg, like a split squat, or do go on a platform and do a one leg squat, lower yourself down, and it's going to be much more beneficial from a sports point of view. And to be able to squat massive weight for jiu-jitsu is going to have, after a certain point, is not going to have a major benefit. It may actually have a detrimental. There's a guy, Chad Wesley Smith. I don't know if you ever.
I know
him. He trained. He was was he world champion powerlifter?
Yeah.
And he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu now, and he's a massive man. Like he's brute strong. But he went to train with Hamilo Bahal who's a world-class jiu-jitsu guy, and he noticed straight away like that he was the strongest guy in the room, but he was tapping out all the time. But he could bench press like massive weight. He could deadlift 3 times his body weight or more. I don't know, just ridiculous amount of weight that it's for the average person it's like beyond human. And he commented then, and he said actually when he stopped weightlifting for a while, he got better at jiu-jitsu. Because his strength ratio was so high, he needed to drop down a little bit and give the other attributes of his body a chance, to develop and so he could make progress. So
it is probably hard as well. And I from my perspective as well, coming in from a bodybuilding background, it's a constant reminder. I remind myself all the time, and I really try hard to remind myself, is that you can't just rely on just being really strong, because it never ends well, because you're literally going to you're gas out, no matter how fit you are. If you keep pushing against the wall, you're going to gas out, because if you just have this approach of like brute force and shoving, grunting and all stuff, it's like trying to drive a car with the handbrake on. It isn't going anywhere. And sometimes the fun thing about jiu-jitsu is sometimes the simplest little nudge in the right direction, or the little a little small little tiny adjustment, gives you leverage, huge leverage, as opposed to trying to go on a short lever and trying to push it really hard. You can get a long lever down here and you can just go, and you can change the tide altogether. But that's it. It's a constant battle, I suppose, is to try to not let technique, or not let strength get in the way of relying on technique. It's hard.
And that's the principle of jiu-jitsu: maximum efficiency and minimum effort. I'm sure you've known it many times, when you've lifted a massive weight, that once you put it down, you lift up a massive weight, you put it down and you nearly faint.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that while you're trying to do jiu-jitsu, you overexert yourself. And you're also trying to defend yourself at the same time. You might have one good burst, 2 good bursts, and then it's like you're ready to pass out, you know. So
and then you're dead. Yeah, and then you're dead. When you're tired, you're dead. I think that's it's about all we've time for, but I'll kind of wrap it up here, Ryan. But that was a really good discussion, and I think a lot of people will get some takeaways from it. And anyone who is thinking about jiu-jitsu, hopefully this has kind of opened your eyes up a little bit more to the benefits of it. Where can people get in touch with you, Ryan? And if they want to start jiu-jitsu once I think things calm down a little bit with lockdowns, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can go to our website, SligoBJJ.com, or you can get us on Facebook or Instagram, Atlantic BJJ Sligo. So just get in touch with us there. If you want to sign up to we have a mailing list on the website. So if you sign up there, as soon as we're open, we'll be able to give you an email and let you know when the next beginner program is starting up.
That's great. And like if anyone listening needs more information, they can just get in touch with me as well if they still can't get you. But anyone who's local, and they're in the kind of northwest region of Ireland, if they're thinking about it, just give it a try. And I suppose the course you have there for beginners is a nice taster for people. It's a couple of weeks in, and it just gives people a nice taste of it. And it's one of the best things I ever did in my life anyway. And I'm only just fresh into it, but I can't endorse it enough for you. Kind of, I want other people to realize the benefits of it. But I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully sooner rather than later we can get back to it, and and go from there, strength to strength.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Delighted to be on, and hope to see you on the mats again soon.
Yeah, brilliant. I appreciate it. I'll chat soon.